Martin Arnold is another Austrian filmmaker who is working digitally now, but didn't when he made this film in 1991. If it can be said that he made it, I mean, I think he did. You'll have to see if you agree. Some of you will recognize the characters from a very famous and classic American film called To Kill a Mockingbird. But what Martin Arnold wanted was a family scene. And he takes this family scene and subjects it to extreme breakdown. What Martin Arnold does is to extract from the surface of this Hollywood movie all kinds of gestures, shapes, signs, sounds, and meanings that, in a sense, were not in the original, but of course are, because he's added nothing. He's simply changed the order and our perception of the events. Martin Arnold built himself a little optical printer and reshot and reshot and reshot and reworked using charts and diagrams and measurements until he got what he wanted. Tscherkassky's method is rather different. Now, he got hold of a 35mm copy of a film called The Entity. I don't know if anyone's seen The Entity. It was made in 1981 and caused an enormous fuss because of its depiction of ghostly violence against its female protagonist. 20 years later, Tscherkassky uses a copy and reprints it, and in a sense, I don't know if he succeeds, he tries to turn the tables on the film by exposing not the ghost as the thing that's attacking the woman, but film itself that's attacking the woman. And what he did was this. He works in a small darkroom on very homemade equipment, though it's very hard to tell this when you look at the film. He uses a laser pen. He has raw footage at one level, and on top of it, he puts a copy of the film frame by frame. And with his laser pen, he burns details from the original film onto the new film stock. It means he can have up to 5 layers in each frame that you're about to see.
It's that sense of work, you mentioned about work which is to do with moments and kind of fragment, but also this tremendous sense of the infinite. The kind of work which, thinking about the kind of all the conventions of narrative cinema, there's always that very sense, that working towards, there is always this ending. It comes to this end. And in contrast to that, that sense of kind of work which it has a life and maybe will never end. You're measured, you're operating as if it would pace, but there's not the sense of that work. There's never a sense of its completion. Yes, of course, and in fact it does end, but there's something kind of almost generative about it.
Not only work made now, but the historic avant-garde work that we've talked about before, and that I know has been shown in contexts like this, is that quite literally a lot of it is if not infinite, at least incomplete. Yeah. Fernand Léger was one among many painters in the 20s who made a film. His film, which is called Les Belles Mécaniques, which is terribly famous. People have seen, I think, images from it, if not the whole film. It exists in at least 12 different versions, as he cut it and recut it and added and took away, none of which are definitive. And the interesting thing is, he didn't care. At least it didn't seem so, because he showed that film right to the end of his life in whatever version he had to hand. And although it had a famous soundtrack made for it by George Antheil called Ballet Mécanique, which is now often played with it, as far as we know, it was never played with it at the time. Modernist artists of that generation didn't have a notion of completeness. Generative work is part of electronic thinking, isn't it? Because the combinations digitally of images and sounds and items and information is pretty much infinite. There's been a lot of stuff in which people have set up things that will potentially go on forever.